Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Hoffman. I am the Small Foods Extension Specialist at NC State and also the host of this Virtual Muscadine School. And today we have a lot of presentations, so we're just going to go quick over a couple of things about sampling, quality, and harvest. Again, this is a 30,000-foot overview. This is mostly for somebody who wants to get into muscadines or who's new to muscadines or who wants to expand their operation. This is mostly meant for you guys. So it's going to be 10 minutes, so it's going to be pretty quick. And we start with sampling because sampling is something which is important to determine when do you want to go and harvest. That is true for both fresh market and processing vineyards. So we're going to talk a little bit about sampling and what it means and why it will add to the value of your operation and why it also will be able to improve the value. So sampling is something which is done very frequently in the grape industry. Commercial vineyards always do sample to determine whether or not their grape quality is at the standard at which they want to harvest. And that is true, as I said, for processing and harvesting fresh market vineyards. And in processing vineyards, it's a very, very important method to determine when your best harvest dates are, to determine your best chemistry and your best taste of the berries. And important is also to make sure that you do have your harvester scheduled in a processing vineyard. And the more history you have of your vineyard and the fruit quality in your vineyard, and the more experience you have in berry sampling, the easier it is for you to schedule the harvester based on the berry chemistry rather than on the availability. So again, you can be proactive on this. Sampling in a processing vineyard is really important. And that is also true for fresh market vineyards, where you can determine marketable versus unmarketable fruit. That is some of the cultivars. We grow a lot of different fresh market cultivars in the bronze and in the dark realm, and both of them, in both realms, cultivars can be ripe, but they do look a lot different from like a very dark bronze to a very light bronze. And it's very important to educate your customers and also educate your crew and your labor to determine what is a ripe versus an unripe fruit in those different cultivars. And that also, especially if you're a wholesaler, allows you to meet the standard or the minimum Brix levels on a clamshell. That is important because you can get rejected if that is not true. And as I said, it allows you to train your customer crew as well. Talking about training in the processing world, a vineyard manager or an assistant vineyard manager or the winemaker, as well as any assistant to the winemaker, need to learn how to assess basic berry chemistry, need to learn how to sample and assess the taste. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more in detail. That is, again, extremely important in processing vineyards and a standard method in the entire grape and wine industry. And that will also train you to learn how harvest timing will affect also later the winemaking process as well. In the fresh market realm, if you are pick or pick your own operation, it is still important to train your customers on different cultivars, and we talk about this in a little bit in more detail. And if you are in a wholesale operation, it is extremely important to train your crew on what is a ripe versus a non-ripe, or marketable versus non-marketable berry. Again, that can differ from cultivar to cultivar in the fresh market realm. There are some devices that are relatively affordable and that will help you. Handheld devices to assess sugar levels or Brix levels, very common. We talk about this in a separate talk today. That is important for any muscadine operation. Basic laboratory devices like pH meter or other scales or a titration unit are useful or needed in a processing operation, in the winemaking operation. That's usually what you should have in a laboratory at a minimum to assess your pH and TA of the chemistry of the berries that you want to harvest. There are also other services, which we're not going to talk about today a lot, but there are testing services that you can assess. That's extremely, especially important for processing vineyards. That will give you a lot more information about your juice in a very short turnaround. Those services are available here in North Carolina. So just like a quick overview, berry sampling comes always before harvest. That is, again, a very common thing in the grape wine industry. You want to know whether or not you have the right quality to have the competitiveness on the market, to have your customer base, and also to improve long-term revenue by binding your customers to your operation. What does it mean for the industry? Again, if this becomes a common practice in the industry, that will not just grow your business, but it also will grow the reputation of the entire industry and also lead to an overall stronger muscadine industry here in North Carolina. So it's important that you understand that no matter if you have a fresh market or a processing vineyard, frequent berry sampling is part of your harvesting already. You do want to start sampling your berries so that you can build up a history of what your vineyard does, and also that you know when is time to harvest in your vineyard. And again, we go over what harvest, what this means. We talked a lot about the technicalities here. That of course means also walking to the vineyard, looking at the berries, tasting them, and deciding based on taste, chemistry, and the visual inspection whether or not you're ready to harvest. So I want to put together a couple of do's and don'ts. Now we're going into harvest. We're coming from sampling and going into harvest, and there are a couple of things which I do want to talk about. What you should do, and then there are a couple of things which I often see done wrong, and again, I just want to point those out. So first thing is in the fresh market operation, very important is that you do have enough labor. Fresh market cultivars are usually harvested 4 to 5 weeks. Some are going even longer. You harvest every 7 to 10 days, depending on the cultivar. You need to have enough labor to have those harvests going on in your vineyard. If you have a U-pick operation, it's also important that you do have somebody or some labor that will clean up some of the overripe fruit at least twice over those 4 to 5 week periods. Important is also that you do have enough market, because muscadines can be very, very high producing, which means you do have a lot of grapes that you're going to have to sell in not a lot of time. So it is important that you do have your market to support all the acreage of grapes that you have. Also get all the supplies you need. And then very important, train your crew and customers. Again, on the white or bronze cultivars, there are huge differences between how a ripe grape looks like and also how it tastes. So that is important. There's a little bit less difference on the dark cultivar side, like Supreme, Lane, and Pog, but there are still differences that you do want to address, and train your crew, and in a U-pick operation, train your customers so that they can get the best quality grapes out of your vineyard. On the processing side, as I said, frequent berry sampling should start. You should be already doing this at this point of time. Schedule the harvest day as early as possible so that you do have plenty of flexibility. And again, if you do shaking, that gives you more flexibility, but it is a high labor demand versus machine harvest, which is what we recommend, very highly recommend for a processing vineyard, to machine harvest. Make sure you've talked to your winery and buyer early. Make sure they know how much you will deliver, and make sure they know when you are coming. And be on time with that. So if you say you're coming at this day around this time, then don't be late. Don't come at night, or don't come like 2 days later or something. Or at least if it's not avoidable, let them know ahead of time. And then another thing which is really important, clean your harvest bins. I know after harvest, those bins are usually very dirty and everybody is exhausted and you just like leave them there. But make sure that they're clean before you put in the fresh harvest of this year's season. So take some time out before harvest and clean your harvest bins with water, maybe a little bit bleach, make sure that all the bleach is gone. But make sure those harvest bins are clean at the end of the day. And that gets me to the don'ts. There are a couple of things which you shouldn't do in a fresh market operation. Again, you shouldn't order your supply too late. You shouldn't plan too late for labor. And you should definitely train your workers and frequently clean up your U-pick operations and train your customers on the different cultivars that you have in your vineyard. It's very, very important. The same on processing. This is for commercial operations. Do not harvest by hands. It is economically completely unfeasible to do that. If you do not have enough space for a machine, or there's no machine available, you can still shake the wines and have a device under your wine which collects the grapes. That is still better than harvesting them into buckets. Again, for a homeowner, totally feasible. For commercial operation, it's economically completely unfeasible to harvest by hand. Pre-arrange with your shipper, with your buyer, with your winery, clean your harvest bins. I'll just say it again, be on time with delivery, and don't let the grapes sit in the sun and heat for several days. Make sure that those grapes get to the winery in a considerable amount of time. So that is it from me. We have a lot of speakers today that are very knowledgeable on everything from food safety all the way to post-harvest and sampling and winemaking, and I'm looking very forward to our workshop today. And please follow us on social media, and we hear some resources. And again, everything will be available to you as a webinar on our homepage here on grapes.cs.nccu.edu. And thank you very much for your attention.